Let's talk about Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah, I think.
Let me read a little bit of her statement, and John, I want you to, walk. There are now 2 Republicans who will vote in favor of witnesses, Mitt Romney and Susan Collins of Maine. Lisa Murkowski will vote no, which is significant. It is sad for me to admit that as an institution, the Congress has failed. It has also become clear some of my colleagues intend to further politicize this process and drag the Supreme Court into it. She's very tough on this issue of the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice.
It's kind of a kitchen sink statement in the sense that, look, if she voted for witnesses, she would have put the Chief Justice in a bad position. Step back. We don't think he would have voted, but she would have had the tie. But she criticizes the House.
Okay, so Congress just went nuclear on Trump. And I'm not talking about another symbolic impeachment vote that goes nowhere. I'm talking about Trump allies actually flipping Republicans who've defended him through everything, who've stood by him no matter what. They're breaking ranks. They're considering voting for impeachment. Some are even thinking about going independent. This is wild because we've seen Trump survive 2 impeachments before. We've watched Republicans stick with him through scandal after scandal. But this time, something's different. This time, his coalition is actually crumbling, and Democrats smell blood in the water. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Because, for a lot of us who are watching this, the vote is really all that matters. I only remember one person speaking on the floor of the Senate during the Clinton impeachment, and that was Joe Lieberman, who people thought might vote to convict, but ultimately was talked out of doing it. And he gave a statement in which he really talked about the agony of watching a fellow Democratic president.
And this is a back and forth. And you heard Schumer, a little prickly there at the end. I'm not going to take any questions. He said there's no deal. So obviously they would have to reach an accommodation of some sort of a deal. And I guess Alan would know this better than me. Would they have to?
Here's what's happening. Democratic Representative Al Green just filed new impeachment articles against Trump. He's citing abuse of power and violation of the War Powers Clause. And he's not doing this alone. Nearly 1 million petition signatures have flooded Capitol Hill demanding Trump's removal. 1 million. That's not just a progressive base anymore. That's a movement. That's real political pressure that members of Congress can't ignore. And the timing could not be worse for Trump because he's already in the middle of chaotic government shutdown negotiations. He's fighting with Congress over a massive spending request, $230 million that Republicans are balking at. And now on top of all that, he's facing impeachment again, with some of his own party considering joining the effort. And here's the thing that's really shocking. Multiple longtime Trump allies in Congress are wavering. We're talking about people who've been with Trump since day one, who voted against impeachment twice before, who've defended him on Fox News, who've gone to his rallies and stood by his side. And now they're quietly telling party leaders they might vote yes on impeachment this time, or at the very least, they might vote present or abstain, which would have the same effect because it makes it easier for impeachment to pass. Why are they flipping? Because they're looking at their districts, they're looking at polling, and they're realizing that defending Trump might cost them their seats in 2026. That's what it comes down to. Political survival. These members of Congress are watching Trump drag the party into chaos. They're watching his approval numbers tank. They're watching independent voters turn against him, and they're making a calculation. Is defending Trump worth losing my job? For some of them, the answer is becoming no. Insiders are reporting that Republicans are literally counting votes right now. They're doing the math. How many Republicans would it take to flip for impeachment to pass? How many need to vote yes or abstain? And they're looking at who's vulnerable in 2026, who's in swing districts, who's facing tough primary challenges or general election fights. And those are the members who are most likely to break with Trump because they need to show their constituents that they're willing to stand up to him, that they're not just rubber stamps, that they care about the Constitution and the rule of law more than they care about party loyalty. Whether that's true or not, that's the message they need to send. And voting for impeachment is one way to do it. And Democrats are going all in on this. They're not just filing impeachment articles and hoping for the best. They're organizing. They're mobilizing grassroots pressure. They've got nearly 1 million signatures on petitions. They're running ads in swing districts targeting vulnerable Republicans. They're holding town halls and rallies. They're making this the only story in Washington because they know this might be their best shot at actually removing Trump, or at least doing so much damage to him politically that he can't recover. They're betting everything on this impeachment push, and with some Republicans actually considering joining them, it might work. But here's where it gets really complicated. because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Trump is simultaneously fighting Congress over government spending. He's pushing for a massive $230 million budget increase that Republicans are calling excessive. He's threatening to shut down the government if he doesn't get what he wants, and that's creating even more tension with his own party, because Republican members of Congress are getting hammered back home for these shutdown threats. Their constituents are saying, why can't you guys just govern? Why does it always have to be a crisis? Why is Trump always threatening to blow everything up if he doesn't get his way? And Republicans don't have good answers. So some of them are starting to think, maybe we'd be better off without Trump. Maybe we need to cut our losses and move on. And Trump's response to all of this, he's reportedly furious. He's lashing out at Republicans who are even thinking about voting against him. He's threatening to primary them, to endorse their opponents, to destroy their political careers. But here's the thing, those threats don't work as well anymore, because Trump's grip on the Republican Party is weakening. His approval numbers are down. His fundraising is struggling compared to previous years, and Republicans are starting to realize they might actually be able to survive politically without his endorsement, or even survive politically by opposing him. That's a huge shift, and it's happening right now in real time. So yeah, this impeachment push is different. It's not just Democrats going through the motions, it's Republicans actually considering joining them. It's Trump's coalition showing real cracks for the first time. It's the possibility that he might actually lose enough support in his own party that impeachment could pass the House. And even if it doesn't pass the Senate, which, let's be real, it probably won't, the political damage from having Republicans vote against him could be devastating. We're talking about 2026 midterms coming up. We're talking about Republicans trying to hold on to power. And we're talking about whether the party decides Trump is an asset or a liability. Right now, for more Republicans than ever before, he's starting to look like a liability. And that's why this impeachment storm matters. All right, let's dig into why this impeachment effort is different from the previous two, and why Republicans are actually considering breaking with Trump this time. Because if you've been following politics for the last few years, you're probably skeptical. You've heard this story before. Democrats file impeachment articles. They make it sound like this is the one that will finally get Trump, and then Republicans vote in lockstep to protect him, and nothing happens. So why should you believe this time is any different? Well, there are some real reasons, and they all come down to political self-interest, which, let's be honest, is what drives most decisions in Congress anyway. First, let's talk about the impeachment articles themselves. Representative Al Green is citing abuse of power and violation of the War Powers Clause. Now, abuse of power is pretty standard for impeachment articles against Trump. We've heard that before. But the War Powers Clause angle is interesting because it's related to Trump's recent military actions and decisions that Congress argues he made without proper authorization. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, not the president. The president can act as commander-in-chief, but he's supposed to get congressional approval for sustained military operations. And Democrats are arguing that Trump violated that he committed U.S. forces to actions without congressional authorization, that he exceeded his constitutional authority, and that's an impeachable offense. Now, whether that argument holds up legally is debatable. Presidents of both parties have stretched war powers for decades, but politically, it's a smart angle because it's not just about Trump personally, it's about constitutional principles. It's about constitutional principles. It's about Congress asserting its authority over the executive branch, and that's something that even some Republicans care about, especially Republicans who've spent their careers talking about limited government and constitutional constraints on executive power. Those members are having a harder time defending Trump when the argument is he's violating the Constitution's clear allocation of war powers to Congress. That hits differently than just saying Trump is corrupt or Trump abused his office in some vague way. And then there's the grassroots pressure. Nearly 1 million signatures on petitions demanding Trump's removal. That's significant, not because petitions by themselves change votes in Congress, but because they represent organized political energy. They represent constituents who are paying attention, who are motivated, who will show up to town halls and primary elections and general elections, and members of Congress are very aware of that. When you're a Republican in a swing district and you're seeing massive petition drives demanding Trump's impeachment, you start to worry, because even if your district voted for Trump, that doesn't mean they want you to defend everything he does, especially when it comes to constitutional violations or military overreach. So that grassroots energy is putting real pressure on vulnerable Republicans. But here's the big reason this impeachment push is different: the broader political context. Trump is in the middle of a massive fight with Congress over government spending. He's demanding $230 million for various priorities, and Republicans are pushing back. They're saying, we can't just keep increasing spending. We can't keep threatening government shutdowns every time you want more money. Our constituents are tired of the chaos, and Trump is not backing down. He's saying, give me what I want, or I'll let the government shut down. I don't care. I'll blame you guys, and I'll blame Democrats, and I'll tell my supporters that Congress is obstructing me, and Republicans are realizing, wait, he's willing to destroy us politically to get what he wants. He doesn't actually care about the party. He cares about himself, and that's creating real resentment. And that resentment is combining with exhaustion because defending Trump is hard work. It requires constant explanations, constant spin, constant attacks on the media and Democrats and anyone else who criticizes him. And after years of that, some Republicans are just tired. They're tired of having to defend things that are indefensible. They're tired of having to explain away scandals and controversies. They're tired of the chaos. And this government shutdown fight is just the latest example. Trump is creating unnecessary conflict. He's making their jobs harder. And they're starting to think, maybe we'd be better off without him. Maybe it's time to move on. Now, let's talk about the specific Republicans who are wavering. We don't have names yet because most of this is happening behind closed doors. But sources are saying there are at least a handful of Republicans who are seriously considering voting for impeachment or abstaining. And the profile of these members is predictable. They're in swing districts that Biden won or came close to winning. They're facing tough re-election battles in 2026. They're moderates who've already broken with Trump on some issues, and they're hearing from their constituents that defending Trump is a problem. These are the Republicans who are most vulnerable politically, and they're the ones doing the math on whether they can survive voting for impeachment. And here's the calculation they're making. If they vote against impeachment, they keep Trump's base happy, but they alienate independent voters and moderate Republicans. And in a swing district, that could cost them the election. But if they vote for impeachment, they lose Trump's base, but they might gain enough independents and moderate Republicans to win anyway. Plus, they get credit for standing up to Trump, for putting country over party, for being principled. That plays well with a certain type of voter. And in a swing district, those voters matter. So some Republicans are starting to think maybe voting for impeachment is actually the smarter political move. Maybe it's how I save my seat. But there's another factor too. Some Republicans are thinking about going independent, like actually leaving the Republican Party, becoming independents in Congress. And that's wild, because that almost never happens. But the Republican Party is so tied to Trump right now that some members are thinking, I can't stay in this party anymore. It's destroying my political future. I need to rebrand as an independent who stands for conservative principles, but isn't part of the Trump circus. And if enough Republicans go independent, that could actually shift the balance of power in the House, because independents could caucus with Democrats on certain votes, or they could play kingmaker by deciding which party they'll work with on any given issue. That gives them a lot of leverage, and it completely upends the current political dynamics. Democrats, meanwhile, are pushing this impeachment effort as hard as they can because they see an opening. They see Republicans who are genuinely wavering, and they're trying to give those Republicans cover to vote yes. They're saying this isn't about partisan politics. This is about the Constitution. This is about Congress asserting its authority. This is about holding a president accountable for violating the War Powers Clause. And if you believe in limited government and constitutional constraints on executive power, you should vote for impeachment regardless of party. That's the pitch Democrats are making to moderate Republicans. And it's smart because it frames the vote in constitutional terms rather than partisan terms. It gives Republicans a principal reason to break with Trump. And Democrats are also ramping up the pressure in other ways. They're holding hearings. They're releasing documents. They're calling witnesses. They're building a public case that Trump violated the Constitution and needs to be held accountable. And every hearing and every document release is another opportunity to put Republicans on the spot, to ask them, do you support the president violating the War Powers Clause? Do you think one person should be able to commit the country to military action without congressional approval? Do you believe in the Constitution or not? Those are uncomfortable questions for Republicans, and Democrats are asking them over and over until some Republicans crack. But let's be realistic about what happens even if impeachment passes the House, because it still has to go to the Senate for trial. And in the Senate, you need 2/3 of senators to vote to convict and remove the president. That's 67 votes. Republicans control the Senate, and getting 17 or more Republican senators to vote to remove Trump, that's a very high bar. It's probably not going to happen. Even with some Republicans breaking ranks in the House, the Senate is different. Senators have 6-year terms. They're less immediately vulnerable to political pressure, and many of them represent deep red states where Trump is still popular. So the odds of Trump actually being removed from office are still pretty low. But here's why this impeachment effort matters, even if it doesn't result in removal, because it's about the political damage. If even a handful of Republicans vote for impeachment in the House, that's a huge story. That's Republicans breaking with Trump on something fundamental. That's the party showing cracks. That's evidence that Trump's grip on the GOP is weakening. And all of that damages Trump politically. It makes him look weak. It emboldens his opponents within the party. It gives moderate Republicans permission to distance themselves from him. And it sets up 2026 to be a referendum on Trump. Do Republicans want to keep following him, or do they want to move in a different direction? And the timing matters too, because 2026 midterms are coming up. Every House seat is up for election. A third of Senate seats are up, and Republicans need to decide what message they're running on. Are they running as Trump's party? Are they defending everything he does and standing by him no matter what? Or are they running as a party that's willing to stand up to Trump when he goes too far? That second message might actually play better in swing districts and swing states. It might be how Republicans hold on to power. So this impeachment fight is really about the future of the Republican Party, about whether they're Trump's party or something else. And that question is going to define the next 2 years of American politics. Okay, let's break this down into simple points so you understand exactly what's happening and why it matters. Point 1. Democratic Representative Al Green filed new impeachment articles against Trump, citing abuse of power and violation of the War Powers Clause. This isn't just symbolic. Green has backing from nearly 1 million petition signatures demanding Trump's removal. That's real grassroots energy. That's organized political pressure. And the War Powers angle is smart because it's constitutional, not just political. It's arguing that Trump committed U.S. forces to military action without proper congressional authorization. And that's something even some Republicans care about, because it's about Congress's constitutional authority. It's about checks and balances. It's not just about whether you like Trump or not. So this impeachment effort has a stronger constitutional foundation than previous attempts. Point 2. Multiple longtime Trump allies in Congress are wavering and considering voting for impeachment or going independent. This is the big story. These aren't Democrats filing articles that go nowhere. These are Republicans, Trump's own party members, who are thinking about breaking with him. Why? Because they're looking at their districts. They're looking at 2026, and they're realizing that defending Trump might cost them their seats. They're in swing districts. They're hearing from constituents who are tired of the chaos, who want Congress to actually govern instead of constantly fighting. And they're making a calculation. Is my loyalty to Trump worth losing my job? For some of them, the answer is no. So they're seriously considering voting yes on impeachment, or at minimum voting present or abstaining, which would make it easier for impeachment to pass. Point 3. This impeachment crisis is happening in the middle of chaotic government shutdown negotiations, making everything worse for Trump. Trump is demanding $230 million in additional spending. Republicans are pushing back. He's threatening to shut down the government if he doesn't get what he wants. And Republicans are saying, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep governing by crisis. Our constituents hate it. And now on top of that, they're dealing with impeachment. So Republicans are getting hit from multiple directions. They're fighting with Trump over spending. They're dealing with impeachment pressure. And they're trying to figure out how to survive politically in 2026. That's a lot. And some of them are starting to think the easiest solution is to just break with Trump, vote for impeachment, distance themselves from him, and rebrand as Republicans who put country over party. Point 4. Party insiders report that Republicans are literally counting votes and calculating whether defending Trump is worth losing their seats. This is happening right now behind closed doors. Republican leadership is doing the math. How many members are seriously considering voting for impeachment? How many might abstain? What does that mean for whether impeachment passes? And they're also looking at the political map for 2026. Which members are in swing districts? Who's vulnerable? And what does it mean if we lose those seats because they defended Trump? This is political survival math, and the numbers are starting to look bad for Trump because more Republicans than ever are concluding that defending him is not worth the political cost, that their careers matter more than their loyalty to him, and that's creating real cracks in his coalition. Point 5. Trump's coalition is crumbling partly because of the $230 million spending request that sparked behind-the-scenes revolt among Republicans. This spending fight is key. Trump wants $230 million for various priorities, and Republicans are saying no. They're saying we can't afford it. We can't justify it to our constituents. We campaign on fiscal responsibility, and you're asking us to approve massive spending increases. And Trump's response has been to threaten them, to threaten government shutdowns, to threaten primaries, to say, you're either with me or against me. And Republicans are pushing back. They're saying, we're not your servants. We were elected to represent our districts, not to rubber stamp everything you want. And that's created a rebellion. Republicans who previously defended Trump on everything are now openly questioning him, and that rebellion is combining with the impeachment push to create a perfect storm. Point 6. If enough Republicans flip or abstain, impeachment could actually pass the House, which would be historically unprecedented. Let's be clear about what's at stake. If impeachment passes the House with Republican support, that's huge. That's Trump being impeached for a third time, and this time with members of his own party voting against him. That's never happened to any president before. And even if the Senate doesn't convict, which they probably won't, the political damage would be enormous. It would show that Trump has lost control of his party, that Republicans are willing to break with him, that his grip on power is slipping, and it was set up 2026 to be a bloodbath for Trump-aligned candidates. Because if Republicans in swing districts see that voting against Trump is politically viable, more will do it, and that could flip the House to Democrats. Point 7. This crisis could split the GOP before the critical 2026 midterms, potentially handing Democrats control of Congress. The Republican Party is facing an identity crisis. Are they Trump's party, or are they something else? And this impeachment fight is forcing them to choose. Some Republicans are going all in on Trump. They're defending him no matter what. They're attacking anyone who questions him, but others are breaking away. They're saying we need to move beyond Trump. We need to be a party that stands for principles, not just loyalty to one person. And that split could destroy Republican chances in 2026. Because when parties are divided, they lose elections. When they're fighting each other instead of fighting Democrats, they lose elections. And Democrats are watching all of this with popcorn because they know that a divided Republican Party is their best shot at winning back the House and maybe even gaining Senate seats. Point 8. Some Republicans are considering going independent to save their careers, which could shift the balance of power in Congress. This is the most dramatic possible outcome. If Republicans actually leave the party and become independents, that changes everything. Because independents can caucus with either party, they can be swing votes on major legislation, they can negotiate for concessions in exchange for their support, and if you have 3 or 4 Republicans become independents in a closely divided House, they become kingmakers. They decide which party has the majority, they decide which bills pass, and that gives them enormous leverage. Plus, it gives them cover back home. They can say, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not even a Republican anymore, I'm an independent who stands for conservative principles and good governance. And that might actually play well in swing districts. Point 9. Democratic leaders are organizing massive pressure campaigns, including 1 million petition signatures, to force Republican hands. Democrats are not sitting back and hoping Republicans break with Trump on their own. They're actively pushing. They're organizing grassroots campaigns. They're collecting signatures. They're running ads in swing districts. They're holding town halls. They're doing everything they can to make it politically impossible for vulnerable Republicans to vote against impeachment. And it's working because Republicans are seeing the energy. They're seeing the organizing. And they're realizing that voting against impeachment might cost them more than voting for it. So Democrats are creating the political conditions that make it safe or even necessary for Republicans to flip. Point 10. Even if impeachment doesn't result in removal, the political damage from Republicans voting against Trump could reshape 2026 elections. Let's be realistic. Trump probably doesn't get removed from office even if the House impeaches him because the Senate threshold is too high. But that's not really the point. The point is the political damage, the message it sends, the precedent it sets. If Republicans vote to impeach Trump, that's a signal to voters that Trump has gone too far, that even his own party thinks he violated the Constitution. And that message matters. It matters in 2026 when those same Republicans are running for re-election. It matters for Trump's political future, and it matters for the Republican Party's identity. So even a failed impeachment could be a turning point in American politics. So where does this leave us? Congress is in chaos. Trump is fighting with his own party. Republicans are calculating whether defending him is worth their careers. Democrats are pushing as hard as they can for impeachment, and the outcome is genuinely uncertain. This isn't like the previous impeachments where everyone knew how it would end. This time, there's real possibility that some Republicans flip, that impeachment passes with bipartisan support, that Trump's coalition actually crumbles. We're watching a potential realignment of American politics in real time, and what happens in the next few weeks could determine not just Trump's fate, but the fate of the Republican Party and the balance of power in Congress for years to come. So yeah, stay tuned, because this impeachment storm is just getting started.